Everyone, and welcome to our presentation today, How to Support Transgender Service Members. My name is Kai River Blevins, and I'm the Director of Education, Chapter, and Veteran Services for OutServe-LDN. This is our third installment in the OutServe Knowledge Online series, a program that brings critical information to our members who are LGBTQ service members, veterans, Department of Defense civilians, and their families. And we do that through events like these and by creating an online repository of information and resources that are specific to the LGBTQ military community. So before we all get started, I want to ask you to mute your microphones and make sure you're not sharing your screen if you haven't already. That way we can avoid any interruptions to the presentation today. And we'll be having a Q&A at the end where you can ask questions. So I just want to remind you before that this is being recorded, and we're actually streaming to Facebook Live today as well. So if you're not comfortable asking a question yourself, for any reason, you can have me ask them. Send me a message through the chat box function within Blue Jeans. You can post in the event Facebook page, or you can go to the Facebook live stream and post there. So with that in mind, we'll turn it over to Blake. Thank you so much for being here today, Blake.
Hey, thanks, Kai. If you can go ahead and go to the next slide there, we'll go ahead and get started. So,
perfect.
Thanks all for you joining today. Really appreciate you coming in and listening to this. Quick talk about who I am and what I do. Right now, I'm a Navy Supply Corps officer, active duty lieutenant commander. I run SPART A, an LGBT military advocacy organization. Our main concentration has been transgender service members, but we also keep up to date with our LGBT service members as well, in partnership with our other organizations. About this time last year, I had also just started my MBA. I'm about 15 weeks from finishing that, and I do a lot of policy advocacy as far as reaching out to leadership within the military community, so that we can answer questions and clarify policy issues that come up out in the field, whether it's your case manager said that the military is not offering surgical options, or there's a question about when pronouns are allowed to be changed. We can reach back and make sure that nothing has changed. Since they have been doing some administrative changes here or there, and to give a definitive answer to your leadership as to how they can proceed. And as you'll see there from the upper right-hand corner, I'm also a dog dad to the cutest little Tweenie around named Lucas. So if you hear whining in the background, it's because I'm home and I'm not paying enough attention to him. So if you can go on, let's go with next slide. So first thing I want to talk about is why the policy changed. A lot of people thought that, there were bigger things that we needed to work on and stuff like that, but we still had this aspect of don't ask, don't tell that wasn't changed when we repealed the law. And part of that had to do with the fact that it was a military policy, not a legal issue. So we didn't need to go to Congress to do this. So we started walking the halls with various people, both inside and outside the building. And what we found and what we told them was that no one truly succeeds from inside the closet. As you can tell from that quote in the upper right, closets kill, they suffocate us. And in order for our service members to be fully successful in their lives as service members, they need to be able to be themselves and who they are full time. And that resonates with a lot of people because the military is not just a job. It's a lifestyle. You live and breathe it, because deployments, those are the people that you're with, and to have to hide that aspect of yourself really can drag a service member down and cause them to not succeed as well as they could. The other thing too, the military is having a retention issue with keeping the best and the brightest. As we know, the Air Force has a pilot shortage. We're having trouble recruiting quality members because of just our society in general being because of the health requirements and all these other things. And so the military needs that best and brightest to stay. And here we are, we have transgender service members who are already doing their jobs and succeeding, and we have no desire for them to leave. The next thing down there is understanding that the medical policy that we were using to exclude transgender service members was from the DSM-3 from back in like 1984. So we've obviously moved beyond that, and we're into the DSM-5, where it states that gender dysphoria is not a medical disability. It is a anxiety that can be cured through transition. The other thing that we talk about is inclusion and diversity. Not just diversity as in I need this trans person on my team so that I look diverse, but in thoughts of how people think and how people act. And with that comes innovation. As the quote says, we need diversity of thought in a world to face the new challenges. And if we continue to exclude people, then we lose the ability to bring about new ideas because we will suffer from groupthink. And as we talk through this, you'll see I talk about standards and capabilities, and this is about transgender service members are able to meet the standards that the military has set. We're not talking about lowering standards. Lowering standards and changing the standards are two totally different things. Changing a standard means that we've realized that that standard no longer applies. And that is what we've said with transgender service members, is that that standard should no longer apply because they're fully capable of contributing to the mission. So as we move through this, we're going to talk about it from two different angles. We're going to talk about how to support transgender service members as service members, as active duty, as commanders. And we're going to talk about how civilian allies can support transgender service members as they're not in. So we will walk through those two aspects, and then we'll come to a question and answer period. So next slide for me, please. So many people talk about, okay, they're a commander, they have a service member or a senior NCO, they have a transgender service member in their units, and how can they support those service members as they move through the process? This is a great question in the fact that there are definitely every different things that we can do. And the first thing I want to talk about is understanding the policy. I understand there's a lot of confusion regarding the policy and what policy is in place. And right now, I can tell you that with 4 court injunctions, that the 2016 policy is the policy that we are operating under as we speak. There is no new policy. It is the same policy as we've always had, and that's the one that you should be reading and understanding. So that's the 1300.28, that's the DoD instruction, and then each service has their own implementation policy of that policy. So whether you're Coast Guard, Army, Air Force, Navy, or Marine Corps, each of you has your own policy. And I need you to make sure that you grab those policies, that you read through those policies, and don't be afraid to ask questions. Call the medical service people that are in charge of those. Each service has set up a service center coordination cell at the Pentagon or in their HR departments to help clarify any confusion regarding the policies that how they're being put into practice. So don't be afraid to ask questions, and don't be afraid to reach out for help. Those are the two biggest barriers that we've seen with regarding to people getting underway with their transition, is really just that people don't understand what policy or don't know what policy is in effect, and they don't know that their own service has a policy for implementation. The second thing is lead from the front. And I say that because as commanders or as senior NCOs, your sailors, your service members, your soldiers, airmen, Marines will follow your example in how you treat your transgender service members. So if you don't use the right pronouns, no one else is going to use the right pronouns. If you act as though they're an inconvenience, everyone else is going to act as though they're an inconvenience. So I challenge you to not only understand those policies, but to make sure that you understand where you have some leeway. In the Army, for example, there is no regulation that states that thou shalt use said pronouns based on the gender and years. There's no regulation that states that. The Navy, on the other hand, in their commander's handbook, says that commanders should use the pronouns that are endears until that policy changes. However, you as a commander can change that or can implement your own thing where you use those pronouns for that service member, because it is should, not shall. And while we cannot force anyone to use the pronouns outside of what is endears, they will follow your example. The next thing is to advocate where you can. And in this, I mean, if there's a question regarding how a service member is proceeding through their transition and you have a question, or you're not getting the answer that you're supposed to be getting from the medical community or from the SCCC, you need to make those phone calls. It should not be up to the E4 to be answering questions regarding medical policy when it should be the commander really digging deep into that, or that senior NCO as their advocate. And as I said before, using names and pronouns, when I first came out of the military, or out in the military, policy obviously hadn't changed. And I had an 05 lieutenant colonel ask me about my name. And when I told her, obviously it wasn't legally changed yet, they decided they were going to use that name, and they were going to use it as in just like a call sign. We use nicknames and other names for people all the time. There shouldn't be an issue with changing a name and what you call someone. There's nothing that says thou shalt use your legal name in public forums. That's simply not the case. So take the time, understand your policies, but use those names and pronouns when you can. The next thing is to read their stories. So obviously over the last year, we've put out a lot of stories about how service members are succeeding, but also in cases where service members are struggling. And a lot of those struggles have to do with command leadership, command support. And when you read those stories, understand what you can do better and what you can change. And those will help you lead those service members better and help them succeed. And the last thing I want to talk about is expect excellence. Transition should not be used as an excuse to get out of anything. And we expect our service members to be successful in their careers. And so I challenge you as leaders to make sure that while you're understanding everything, that you can continue to expect excellence from your service members. And that means expecting them to pass their physical fitness tests. That means expecting them to do their job to the best of their ability. That means expecting them to follow all policies and procedures regarding anything not related to their transition. So expecting that excellence will help them become better service members. As they transition, they're going to be becoming more into themselves and more confident. And the more we expect of them, the more they will step up and succeed. So I challenge you to make sure that you're doing that correctly. So we'll go on to the next thing. How our civilian allies can support transgender service members. This is big. So this is something that people ask me all the time as I talk in public and things. How can I support our service members when obviously I'm not active duty and I'm not a leader in the service? So these are some things that I want to talk about. Read and share the stories. Like I said, obviously we've got stories all out throughout the internet. So read those stories, be able to share those stories, share them on social media, and Be able to tell them even without looking at the stories. When people bring up transgender service, be able to tell them stories about Katie Schmid or Patricia King or Logan and Layla or any number one. There's hundreds of stories out there. Those are the ones that are off the top of my head. Not the main ones, obviously. Like I said, there are hundreds of stories out there. The next thing I want to talk about is ask questions. So if you don't understand something or you don't know how to answer a question, feel free to ask. Whether it's reach out to OutServe, reach out to SPART A. All of us have inquiry boxes. Don't be afraid to ask questions. Don't be afraid to go to your fellow transgender civilians and ask them questions regarding how to do pronouns or how to, can I ask about pronouns? Can I ask about this? Don't be afraid to ask those questions. The next one is to donate to our partners. We can go to the next slide real quick so we can take a look at what those partners are. Donate to the ones that are standing there in the middle of the fight as far as the legal aspects of it. So I do not need you to donate to SPART A. I need you to donate to these organizations here that are leading the legal front. OutServe-SLDN, American Military Partner Association, Transgender American Veterans Association, Lambda Legal, Center for Lesbian Rights, National Center for Transgender Equality. All of these folks are leading the much more aggressive front with what we are doing. And I encourage you that you can contribute significantly by donating to these partners. Okay, let's go back. All right, so the next one, again, use names and pronouns. We've kind of talked about that. Understand what names and pronouns they prefer. Don't be afraid to ask and do that. The next one is huge. So we're going to talk, one of the big things is if you look at the t-shirts that are out or you look at any of those things, talk capabilities, not rights. So a lot of the t-shirts say, trans rights are human rights. Absolutely, they are. But when it comes to the military, we're not talking about our right to serve because there's no inherent right to serve in the military. It is about capabilities and standards. So it is not that I have a right to serve. It is that I am capable of serving my country based on the standards that they've placed before me. If the standard is outdated based on outdated medical policy, then we can change that standard. It's not lowering the standard. It is simply changing the standard. And we are fully capable. So talking capabilities, not rights, is extremely important. So that's a big aspect of it. So, and the last thing I want to talk about the experts. So we've had several organizations that have come out over the last year in support of transgender military service, in the fact that there is no barrier to transgender military service based on the standards that we have in place. So when you talk about the American Psychological Association, the American Psychiatric Association, the American Medical Association, RAND, all of those have come out in support of transgender military service, saying there is no reasonably medical standard that should exclude us. So those are the things that you want to talk about in regards to how transgender service member, how you can support transgender service members throughout the thing. And again, it is extremely important to talk those last 2 points. If you're gonna talk to folks about transgender military service, we want to make sure that we talk capabilities, not a right to serve, and we want to make sure we talk about military medical experts and what they've come out and said. So I know that there are some questions regarding some things that I've said, and so I already saw that. So as we go through this, it's important to remember. So today, 1 year ago today, we had the tweets came out to try and ban us from military service, and in that we have stated that we're already here, we're here to stay, and we continue to succeed and serve. And that is, and showing that we have those capabilities. So I know I saw some questions specifically regarding pronouns, and with leaders, obviously, yes, nope, can't force leaders to change their use of pronouns until it says so in DEERS. That is something that we're working on. But we can't force it. They are definitely allowed to do that until our gender marker changes in DEERS, because that is the standard. However, it is not unheard of for them to change that standard should they know that they can, but we aren't going to be able to file a complaint about it. So if Army leaders choose to use pronouns prior to the end, choose to use the correct pronouns prior to the gender marker change in DEERS, good on them. If they don't, it's not something that we can force at this moment, because that's the standard. Really is that your pronouns are what they are in DEERS, minus a policy, because there is no policy. So there's no policy prohibiting it, and there's no policy enforcing it. So that while unfortunate at the moment, is something that we will continue to look on how to change, but it's not, I mean, it's up there in priority, but right now our priority is keeping a policy in place, and our service members continuing to serve. So now we can open it up to questions as we go. So Kai, over to you with questions.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you so much, Blake. A lot of really great information and things to think about when supporting trans service members, whether or not you're in the military or you're a civilian and a supporter. Everything in here is stuff that you can do. So yeah, with that, does anybody have any questions right now? So I actually have a quick question to get us started, Blake. You talk a lot about using names and pronouns. I know a lot of people have asked me, you know, how do you start using somebody's name and pronouns? Like, what are ways that you can, you can do that? Because I know a lot of people just get hung up. They've known somebody for a long time. They're used to using somebody's certain name or pronouns. So what do you have to say for people like that who want to make the change and to start using people's pronouns? Are there any like tips or tricks on how to make that switch?
So there are a couple of different things. One is to listen. So a lot of times people will come forward and tell you, hey, this is my preferred name and my preferred pronoun. So if they tell you that, then it's important for you to take that on, listen, internalize it, and really start living it out. Now, if you come across somebody that you may or may not know, and you're unsure, typically it is perfectly okay to ask what their preferred name and pronoun is, so that you can make sure that you start off on the right foot. The other thing to remember is that none of us are perfect, obviously. So if you mess it up, do a quick apology and then go back to talking, right? There's no need to make a big deal of it. It would be just hey, no, totally sorry about that, and then go on with the conversation using the correct name and pronouns. So those are the types of things that are extremely important.
Perfect. Thank you so much for that.
I got a quick question.
Yeah, go ahead, please.
Sorry, I just wanted to know if there is any experience. What has been the experience with your members, reaching out to elected representatives to kind of get help when they're having difficulties with a command? Is that something that's been unfruitful, or is that something that's been productive?
So a couple of different things with that. It is extremely difficult with outside of official channels to insert ourselves, especially as active duty service members, into someone else's command. There are a couple of things that can happen is that you use those official channels, whether it's EO or IG, with regards to moving paperwork along and treating you with dignity and respect. But as service members, it's best to find a peer. I've used a couple of chiefs on occasion to help with Navy sailors if they're in the same area to kind of do a chief-to-chief talk. I've reached out to my own peers to kind of help them understand how best to do that, and I've had my peers reach out to me in order to do that. But really, we have to use and we have to encourage the use of those official channels of EO and IG with regards to using the words dignity and respect and making sure that we can cite what particular policy that they are violating. If it's just because they're ignorant, then we can help educate. If it's but that's about what we can do at the moment and provide that peer-to-peer support as we figure it out. But as far as religious objections and things like that, I haven't quite figured out how to crack that nut with addressing it. Not officially.
Thank you.
Hey Blake, we have a question coming in through Facebook Live. Do you have any recommendations on how to support our trans siblings that are also survivors of military sexual trauma?
The best thing that I have right there is that we use we definitely obviously use that peer-to-peer support. Military sexual trauma, you should be able to go to the mental health professionals to seek that help. That is not something that is not a service that we are proficient in. It is definitely something where we can improve our services with regards to all of our personnel and all of our advocacy organizations with military sexual trauma across the board. But right now, my best advice is that using our mental health services and using that peer-to-peer support, and then also local organizations throughout the is with PFLAG and some of those also have support groups specifically focused on military sexual trauma, especially in areas of fleet concentrations.
Perfect, thank you.
Great. So if there aren't any more questions, we will go ahead and wrap this up. I want to say thank you again to Blake for such a great presentation and for talking to us about how to support trans service members. This is a really important topic right now, specifically as we transition into this current period where we're at with trans service, for people to know how to stand up for their fellow trans service members, and also for people who are in positions of leadership on how to support their service members.
So one thing I wanted to add to that real quick is that we have had right now we have had two service members graduate from boot camp. I did see a question on how we're getting those through. We have had one Navy and one Army service member, transgender service member, graduate from boot camp in the last month, and we have several more in the pipeline as we move forward.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you for that. So great. So actually, before I wrap up, I want to let you all know about next month's presentation. we will be having EJ Smith, licensed professional counselor and a Marine Corps partner, talking to us about how to recognize and challenge our unhelpful thinking styles. And the name of her presentation is Mind Hacks: Are Your Everyday Thoughts Keeping You Down? That'll be Thursday, August 30th at 1 p.m. Eastern. And so thank you all again for showing up today. And Blake, before we close out, can you tell people where they can find some more of these stories that you're talking about, and where they can find more information about the work that you're doing through SPARTA?
Yeah, so you can go to https://:spartapride.org, and or you can email the inquiries box on to ask questions regarding anything with regards to transgender military service. We have a Future Warriors group, so if you know anybody that's looking to join the military, we have a recruiter and a couple of our service members that run that group to help service members navigate the recruiting aspect of it. And we'll make sure that Kai uploads the slides to the event so that they're available to everyone.
Yes, and thank you so much. And this video will be posted next month on the OutServe-SLDN website as well, for any of you who want to share it or come back to see what Blake said about this. So thank you all again, and have a great day.